What is sin?
So, wow. See, honestly, I didn't even realize. I didn't think that this conversation was going to go this way. Like, I don't want to know just what does the Bible say. No, I want to know the author of the Bible. How does he think? What does he want?
That's interesting. Why have you not chosen to go down the path of being a pastor or a reverend?
That is hilarious.
Because you are very knowledgeable on the Bible. I feel like you have a gift.
That's a deep question right there. That's probably the best question you asked so far. That's a deep one.
Oh, nice. Save it for last.
So we're on your show.
All right. Thank you for coming. This is finally my opportunity to interview Creed from the Creedpodcast. He did an interview with me a couple of months ago, and so now I get to get him on my podcast. So, how are you?
Amazing, as usual.
So I've noticed on your, we're just going to jump right into it. I noticed on your videos, what you've been posting lately, it's a lot more stoic type, that's the best word I know how to use, or philosophical phrases, sayings that aren't really sayings yet because you haven't heard anybody else say it the way that you've said it. Can you explain kind of like what exactly is your podcast about?
Oh my gosh, what is my podcast about? That's too big of a question. How do I boil it down to just like a few sentences? What's my podcast about? God, wisdom, success, fallacies, uncovering lies or common beliefs that people have that are false ideas. I like to talk about things that are intriguing to me, and if it's intriguing to me, I want to share it with other people. So I also like to do reaction videos and everything, but lately my content's about sharing, giving little nuggets of wisdom, and then trying to make wisdom go viral instead of taking like drama and things that are controversial, how it was last year with my content. A little bit controversial. I just thought to myself, how do I make wisdom and practical advice go viral? And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So you're trying to put out there these basically infallible truths that it would still help people. People can use it no matter what religion or faith they come from. It's practical truths that anyone can use. And you're trying to make it more normal.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, you don't have to be someone who believes in God to take this advice. It's universal, and it's principles, right? Like, let's say, for example, like one of the videos I made, one of them got 8,000 views recently. I don't remember which one it was. It was, I think I said, it may have been the one where I said, even the least intelligent person in the room can be perceived as a wise person when he has control over his mouth and emotions. And then it just got tons of views.
Wow.
Like, just practical advice. And that's actually, and someone commented in there, like, that's a proverb from the book of Proverbs. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know that. But how do you word it in a way where it's like, a lot of people think that if it's not in the Bible, then it's not true.
Right.
I don't believe that.
I've heard that a lot about whenever if especially people in Christianity, if they don't hear it out of the Bible word for word, then they don't agree with it and they can't accept it. They have to go back to the Bible and prove that they can agree with what you're saying because they found something that sounds similar to what you said, and that makes it okay, I can believe that now.
Like,
Have
yeah,
you
now I believe
experienced
it. Because and then it's like, wait a second. You knew that was true whether you saw it in the Bible or not? It was true whether you saw it in the Bible or not. But yeah, the book of Proverbs is loaded with wisdom. It's loaded with wisdom, and I've read that book. I probably read that book more than any other book in the Bible. Just reading it on repeat. And then I just like practical advice because I see how wisdom has changed my life little by little, and that's why I make that content.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but hey, let me say something real quick. I want you to bring it.
Uh-huh.
I want you to bring it. Like, ask me some real good questions. Questions. Can you think of a question? Because you know me well, right?
Right.
Think of a question that maybe you don't know about me. Like, you've known me for a while now, but is there anything in the back of your head like, I don't know this about him? I'm curious.
I'm going to play around with that idea, and maybe I can find something that I don't know yet.
Yeah, Susy's practicing right now. She's practicing for podcasting. But how do you feel about having headphones on?
I like the headphones.
You like wearing headphones?
I thought it was going to talk back to me, and I was going to hear myself repeat what I'm saying through the headphones.
Yeah.
And that was going to make me go crazy. But I kind of like it.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to do this regularly, but yeah.
I like it. It's kind of cute. Too bad my pink headphones don't
I don't know, I
work.
feel like I'm an alien or something.
You'd be an
A
alien
spaceship.
if you had, like, the pieces sticking out of your head.
Yeah. All right, so what you got?
So one of your videos, you've talked about anger, and I find anger such a controversial subject in the Christian community. What can you explain to me about anger with what you've learned through just learning wisdom and practicality and principles? What is it about anger? Because you say that people shouldn't be angry. Like, it's possible to, like, have no anger. How do you explain that?
Yeah. Well, how do I put this? Who would you feel safer around? If there is two men in a room, one seems like he's angry. He seems like he's a little bit on edge. Like, if you even look at him the wrong way, he might flip out. You don't know. He's unpredictable. Who would you feel safer around? The guy who you might think might get angry over something very little, or the guy who seems like he's just calm and patient and quiet? Maybe he gets annoyed sometimes. Maybe he gets angry sometimes, but you can tell for the most part, he is very self-controlled. Who would you feel safer around?
The man who appears more self-controlled, but at the same time, this is where I struggle.
Uh-huh.
Because if
This is real.
because say I'm in a room with let's say I'm at the gym. And I'm in a situation, somehow by some miracle, even with all the cameras, I'm in a situation and I need to feel safe around somebody. And I look around and I'm kind of judging, like, okay, who's the calm person who's going to be able to handle everything well? Sometimes the person who seems calm, that they're just putting up a front, and that's not how they really are.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, so how does a person recognize that person's calm and that person? Is that just something you just have to learn about that person over time? Or is there actually some trick to knowing who, and I'm saying this as a woman, and I see men, how do I know, like, okay, this one's okay, that one, like, this is the one that if I'm in danger, that's the direction I run, kind of thing?
Well, being someone who's been in that situation as a bodyguard and armed security, I've been around security guards and bodyguards, armed guards, private security folks, guys with ex-military background, ex-police officers becoming bodyguards, right? And I've seen grown men who have taken on the job as a bodyguard act out of anger when they're in a situation. And usually the situation doesn't end up well. And literally, I just talked to a guy I just met a guy recently who we were having a conversation about our jobs, and he was telling me that all the different times that he's been in fights where he's had someone shoot at him, where he's had to fire back, where he's been in these situations. And I just, he didn't know that I was trying to dissect the situation, trying to figure out like what happened. Because he had asked me how often I've been in situations. And I told him very few. And he asked me a very specific question I'm not going to say right now. But I just told him, look, I've been in situations where I've had to use my hands, but I would never want to have to fire a weapon at someone. But this guy, he's been in repetitive situations like that. When I asked him and I started digging and dissecting the situation, he's thinking that he's impressing me by telling me like, yeah, I was in a gunfight, man. I was in this situation, and each situation he escalated it because it's like he's trying to prove something to whether, okay, he's working at an apartment complex in the middle of the night, overnight. And some guy is parked his car in an area that he wasn't supposed to park his car. And then he's going to go put a ticket on the car or something. And someone's watching him from out their window. They're mad at him. And then now they're yelling back and forth at each other. Mm-hmm. And so me being in very similar situations, I just kind of assess the situation and I say, oh, hey, man, I'm just doing my job. You know, management, they want me to, if anyone parks here, you're not supposed to be parked there because that's a reserved parking spot. I got to put a ticket there. You know, just try to explain. This guy wants to freak out on the person. You're not supposed to park here. Escalating a situation. And that's why I think anger is not a good thing, and you escalate things, but I don't know, I'm kind of generalizing it, right?
But that makes sense, because if you can de-escalate, when you're in a situation as a bodyguard, security guard, I imagine people are usually on edge anyways, especially if they have to be approached by you. They're going to feel uncomfortable and ready to fight. So you would need to be able to know how to de-escalate if you don't want to end up in a more dangerous situation where somebody may want to be fighting, or weapons are pulled, or police have to be called. I imagine there's a lot of situations where you have to de-escalate.
Yeah, I've had. I remember. I mean, I was at one job where it was just a grocery store. It was at a grocery store down in Phoenix, and I was working there at night. I don't remember what time it was. Probably 9 or 10 at night, and people coming in and out, people stealing stuff constantly. And at this point, I'm an unarmed guard, right? They just say, hey, by the time they get to the parking lot and they step into the street, whatever they stole, let them get away with it. Don't try to stop them or anything. You know, try to be a hero. And I know logically, yeah, don't try to be a hero. Like, your life is not worth trying to stop someone from stealing something. You know, it's nighttime and you got guys coming in and out and they're pretending like they're shooting you with guns with their fingers. Whatever. Okay, whatever. Just ignore that. But many other guys who have had my same job, when they're in a situation where someone insults them, they instantly want to fight.
Why do you think that is? And we'll get back to this needing to de-escalate, but because we're going down that trail, why do you think it is that these other guards, I'm assuming both male and female, it's not specific towards either one?
Mainly males, but yeah.
Okay. So, but what you've observed is they just escalate. They get, if somebody offends them in some way.
Yeah, well, because you're asking me about anger. Like, why do I think anger is not good? It just, growing up in a home where there's a lot of anger in the home, you know, I just so happen to come across the right friends, the right people, some church folks who, you know, I went to church with some people, and a lot of people, you know, very loving and kind and patient. And then I dreaded coming home, right? Because there's a lot of anger in the home. And so when I take on a job where, you know, you deal with a lot of angry people, I've never seen anger. Being an angry person is just not beneficial.
Right.
It just really isn't. And so, I don't know. And I know people, they'll say things like, well, why not get angry at something evil. Like if something bad happens, if there was, I don't know, someone did something very bad, if there was like a Hitler or something, wouldn't you get angry? And I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying I don't feel anything. I'm just invincible. I have no feelings. I have no emotions. But I do whatever I can to practice not allowing that thing to overtake my mind. Because you ever been in a situation where someone gets you mad and then you say something to them that you didn't want to say to them? Or maybe you
Or
did
I,
something that you didn't want to say.
or
It's like this
maybe,
thing just takes over.
or maybe I've said something I wanted to say, or I did something I wanted to do, and then later I was like, oh, I really shouldn't have.
Yeah.
That it got me in trouble. It came back and bit me.
Or you ever seen someone
Yeah.
get so angry, their body's shaking? I'm just like, there's something wrong with this. And I think that we live in a very angry world. People, if someone has a disagreement with you about something, even on the smallest thing, you can kind of feel it in your gut sometimes. It's like you feel a little bit like annoyed with them, and then that small little annoyance can escalate into being very irritable, and then to getting frustrated, and then getting angry, and then the bitterness, and you haven't acted on anything. But in your mind and in your heart, you kind of have ill will towards that person. And I just think that to answer your question, I think it's a very destructive thing. And it's something that, not saying like, oh, I am invincible and I never experience moments where I'm like, oh man, that's frustrating or whatever. I just practice my best to not allow the evil in this world to corrupt my heart.
And for the people out there who are, their goal is they also see similar. Maybe they grew up in an angry household and they're like, dude, I don't want to be angry, but I feel like I don't have a choice. I don't know how to not be angry. What would you say to those people who are, they don't want to live that way? How do they
They don't want to be
achieve
an angry
that?
person.
Yeah, they're like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be
Right.
angry. My mom was angry. My dad was angry.
Right.
Maybe there was physical violence going on in the house as well. And they're like, but that's all they knew. So how do you, what would you say to that person who maybe they're just coming out of the teenage years, they're trying to make the right choice, but they don't know how?
Practicing being patient with people, like recognizing every single moment where, let's say you're having dialogue with someone, they say something that you didn't like, and then internally you're like, oh, you're kind of judging them a little bit, even on the smallest degree, that small little judgment. Maybe someone looked at you wrong. Maybe they're dressed a certain way. Maybe you have some sort of a prejudice towards them. Maybe they have a shirt that you don't like, or maybe they subscribe to a religion that you don't like or agree with, and there's something in your gut that you're just like, I don't like this person. Recognizing those moments, like why? Ask yourself, why am I judging this person? How come I don't like that person? They never did anything to me. They never said anything to me. They did nothing wrong. We're just have a different way of thinking, different mindset. And I would say practice, or like, let's say in the middle of a heated argument, if you can catch yourself in the middle of a heated argument, catch what's going on in your head while you're in this heated argument, you'll see like you went from completely loving this person, quote unquote. I don't know, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever, right? You went from completely lovey-dovey in love with this person to some sort of disagreement happen, and instantaneously within moments you feel like, I want to leave this person, I want to break up, I want to get a divorce. Like all logic goes out the window because the emotion is so high that all logic just goes out the window. And so I would say just practice paying attention to the moments where when you get that slight inclination of slight annoyance, or even if someone's tapping a pin and they're tapping that pin, and in your gut you're like, it's kind of annoying, right? And I say that because someone's like, what's the value in that, paying attention to that small little thing? Well, because think about it like this. You ever seen someone who has children, and the children are just enjoying themselves, having fun, playing with toys, and maybe they're making a little bit too much noise, but the parent completely and utterly overreacts to this child.
Yes.
Put that away. Go in your room. Kid didn't do anything.
Right.
And that slight little annoyance that you have towards that child, if you're doing that consistently, repetitively, over and over again, over time, for years, that child's going to end up hating you.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're annoyed by this kid, your child, they're more likely to become a criminal because they don't like you as a parent. They don't trust you as a parent. They don't like you. They don't want nothing to do with you. That child's more likely to become a criminal now because they don't feel loved by you.
That's deep. So you're saying that children who are not receiving love from their parents, whose parents are being impatient, becoming angry at them, those children are more likely to be criminals.
I'm saying that if a child lives in an angry household, that child's more likely to become a criminal.
Right.
He's gonna be angry at the world. The people that were supposed to love him don't love him. Maybe it's like internally they feel like, oh, I love my child. I'll do anything for my kid, right? It's your kid.
Right.
But you don't treat them with love. You're always annoyed with them. I remember I saw this guy one time. He grabbed his daughter by her arm, and he's telling her, get in the car. And she's like, I'm trying to. And I'm like, what? That is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's intriguing to me. I'll just end on this point. It's intriguing to me because I don't have any kids. I do want to have kids one day, right? And I study and I learn psychology because I'm like, I don't want to raise my children in a way similarly where how I was raised. I mean, I wasn't raised in the worst conditions, but not the best. Mm-hmm. And I just so happened to get lucky and meet the right people that became good influences in my life to help me to actually overcome a lot of the anger that I had. And so, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Because, like, what you're saying is something that you'll read in psychology books. If, like, when I was in college studying psychology, that was some stuff that they talked about was if you are raised in a household that is angry, potentially physically violent, abuse of that sort, you're more likely to be a criminal. And
right.
So, and you're saying the way to help them is by being, the way to help avoid bringing on that into your life as an adult is to just practice being patient.
Constantly.
Okay.
It's a way of living. It's a default setting that should be in your brain.
Awesome.
Like, practice being patient.
That's amazing.
It was a very interesting conversation. I didn't know it was going to go this way.
I didn't either. I was like, let's just wing it, see what happens. But that makes me then, I've been studying a lot. So this is where my train of thought is going with all of it. As we talk about the anger and having the hate, and what my mind then goes into is something I've been studying a lot lately with a lot of people call it the ego. So whenever you're feeling emotion, then it's usually because of you have like your ego and your super ego. And the ego, your super ego, I don't know why they call it that way.
Who said super ego?
It's in psychology.
Yeah, yeah. Because I know they talk about ego. I never heard of super ego.
Well, you have three parts. You have the super ego, the ego, and then the id.
You gotta educate me.
So I feel like I'm going to misquote it.
Try it.
All right. You have the ego. I believe that's the one that's more emotional. And so it's going to tell you if somebody offends you, you need to like fight back. Mm. And then the super ego is going to be like, no, we got to find the compromise here. So I'm going to
super ego. That's interesting.
So I'm going to tell you like the super ego, you've got the ego over here telling you, so-and-so insulted me. I'm going to go punch them.
It sounds like you're saying the super ego is more so like the conscious.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then can I pull it up on my phone?
Yeah, go ahead. Do what you.
Here we go. Examples. All right. So the id, which is just ID, it says, I want to skip my workout because I feel lazy and just want to relax. The superego, I shouldn't skip the workout because it's essential for my health and discipline. So
Interesting.
that's the practical, logical side. And then the ego says, I can do a shorter workout today and make up for it with a longer session tomorrow. So the ego's trying, I like butchered it earlier. Okay. But I kind of view the id as being, I refer to it as the ego.
Interesting.
But the id is like the emotional part. It's going to tell you how it feels and what you should do about it. The superego is going to tell you, that's going to be the more logical side, like, no, you need to work out because this is how we take care of ourselves. And then the ego is going to tell you, okay, so we've got this and we've got this. How can we find a compromise?
Mm.
And what I'm referring more to is the id with telling us, we need, like, so and so offended me. This is how I fix. Like, I want to go beat that person up. And so, anyways, I've been doing a lot of research into that aspect. Some people would call it the unconscious mind, where you are just acting with animal type instincts. And then you have this other side of you that is being more logical, thinking things through. What are your thoughts on those? And some people talk like it is possible, like you have the Buddhists who believe that there's a way to experience the complete release of what they would call like the ego, but it would be id in Freud's teaching. It would be the id, but that part of yourself that is very emotional, the Buddhists speak as though you can get rid of it. As a Christian, I struggle because I'm a very emotional person. I deal with a lot of emotions, and I don't know if it's something that I could ever actually get rid of. But what are your thoughts of being able to overcome emotions, especially those very strong ones like anger that we were talking about earlier, the hate? I think you can also be happy and excited, and that would be overdoing how you feel as well and how you respond to it. What are your thoughts? Is it possible to actually overcome?
Is it possible to overcome emotions? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I still have emotions. So I don't know if it's possible to completely overcome it. Well, I'm not going to say I think anything's possible. Let me just start there with my premise. I think anything is possible. But I will say for me, it is a continual, more so like, let's say, I don't know, let's say my mom or my dad dies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to cry. Right? So is it more so the question as not allowing your emotions to overtake you? Is that possible to overcome? Or just in general, is it possible to overcome emotions?
You know what? We're going to go with both. But the first one is it possible to overcome emotions in general?
In general, I think so.
And then how do you think it's possible? And then how is it possible to, for those, we're going to have to cut that part. Is it, because I had a brain fart. Is it possible to not ever react to emotions? Like being completely stoic, is that actually a possibility? Or is it just a cool idea?
That's a good question. I think that it's not necessarily, how do I put this? I think it's possible to become stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not be easily influenced or succumbed by your emotions. Like, let's say you get angry. I think it's possible to continually practice patience to where you're like, okay, that doesn't annoy me as much anymore. And over time, something doesn't annoy you at all. You know, or you're no longer judging, or you're no longer getting angry with people on this specific thing, right? But then you're driving your car and then you realize, man, I get irritated with drivers around me. And I think it's possible that just it's like a continual thing as far as reaching a degree where you aren't controlled by your emotions at all, to any degree at all, and you no longer have to overcome it anymore. I myself have never experienced that yet. But when I look at a man like Jesus Christ, I think that there's a standard that he showed that it is possible, right? Where he's dying on a cross that he didn't want to die on. He prayed. He's like, God, do I really got to go through this? Right? And he always said, people, he's going to die. But then while he was dying, he says to his accusers and the people who were killing him, Father, forgive them. And so this man, while he had the worst thing possible happen to him, falsely accused and getting beaten so badly that he was unrecognizable, and he was still willing to forgive his enemies for the evil that they were doing to him. I see that as, and I speak of this in a historical sense. I'm like, look, if this man is real and this really happened, that is something that I want to strive to be like. And so I look at that like an example, but it's hard for me to answer, is it possible for me as a man to completely overcome it? I think it's just, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I do think when I look at my own life, as I am watchful of my own emotions and I'm aware and also becoming emotionally intelligent with other people, like, I don't, I don't really like using that terminology. Emotional intelligence, but I'm just using that for the sake of this conversation. Like, when you can see where other people are coming from, or you could see other people's mental health issues, and you can see, wow, this person, the same situation that this person would go through, and they would overreact to the situation, and this guy over here doesn't react to that same exact situation at all. Or I know two girls. One was abused sexually by her father, and the other one was also. Both of them had a very similar situation. One forgave and moved on and left that situation, got married, and then the other one fell into just complete hatred, never want to forgive. And I'm like, wow, these are two women who had a very similar situation. One forgave and the other one didn't. And I just observe it like, this is interesting. It is possible to not allow these things to overtake you. Now, that's why I say I don't think it's impossible, to answer your question.
So I read this book called Power versus Force. Bedros Koulian. That was actually where I heard of it from, because I was watching one of his videos, and he recommended it. So eventually, and somebody else, I think.
Patrick Bet
David recommended it. I'm pretty sure Ty Lopez mentioned it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to read it. I went through it. I've almost read it completely through twice. And they talk about different levels of consciousness and the concept of course, power versus force, and how people who are forcing things, they have a lower level of consciousness. And then as you move up in the levels of consciousness, and there's like numbers and then words to go along with it, the highest level is love, and the only one who's ever reached that was Jesus Christ. And so I'm like, I don't know that I could ever reach that, but it's one of my goals is to get there. And so I'm trying to read what I can and learn what I can about this whole unconscious mind, the conscious mind, the ego. It's
at least be at the bottom of the mountain and look up and be like, okay, there is a target.
Right.
Or like, go up there. Don't just like, that's impossible and just dismiss it as a whole. It's like, wouldn't it be better to overcome? And so, yeah.
And there's things at each level, like as I read through the book, and I don't want to say, oh, I'm at this level or that level, but there are things that I'm like, oh, wow, stuff like this at the lowest level, I would get triggered by things like that.
Yeah.
And then I see how like, oh, wow, I've overcome. And then I'm like, it's almost like a game. As I go through the book, I'm like, okay, I hit level 2. All right, level 3.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting
Yeah.
that you
You
said
got to
that.
level up your character.
Exactly. So it is interesting that you mentioned Jesus Christ, because I was like, that was something that was mentioned in that book as well.
Yeah.
And then there was something else you said, and I wish I had a notebook because I would have written it down. It's gone. There was something that you said that pertained to a proverb from the book of Proverbs, but I can't remember what it was.
I think I said. I remember I quoted a proverb earlier. I don't remember what I quoted.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. Oh well, that's okay. Happens to the best of us. So, while we're going down this awesome trail about the ego,
Whatever you want to go.
well, I'm just going with the flow of where we're going, whatever happens. That's another thing. Another thing that's interesting. I used to be this kind of person who would plan stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
I had to memorize my script. That even for a college class, that really made no difference. I already had an A in the class. I had to in my mind, I needed to make sure that my whole script was memorized, and everything was laid out perfectly, planned out perfectly, so that it could be done a certain way, because I didn't want to embarrass myself.
Right.
And whenever we started planning for this, I was like, you know what, let's take a couple notes, maybe a couple questions I want to ask him. But at the end of the day, I was like, there was somebody, George Janko, when he did his podcast with Jordan Peterson, he was like, I decided not to actually write down. He's like, usually I do a lot of planning. He's like, but I wanted to just let it flow. And I was like, that is so deep.
Yeah.
And they said a bunch of stuff about that as well. There's just, for me personally, there's a lot more peace with just like, let's see where this takes us instead of.
See where it takes you. How about let's do something unplanned right now?
What?
Take out your notes and ask me one of those questions in your notes.
Okay.
Let's see.
I've asked some of them.
See what she got. Yeah, I'm trying to get better at when I speak. Get better at taking notes on the topics I want to talk about, because I usually wing it, but I think I'd probably do better when I write down what I'm going to talk about first for me. Testing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What you got? Uh-oh.
Here we go. With the stuff that you post, we're going to go back to this being about you and your podcast that you've been working on. You've been putting it on all the social media platforms. So, does it really strongly matter to you if people agree with what you think and what you believe? If people agree with what you say, is this something, does it trigger you, or are you passionate about needing to convert people, so to speak? I don't know what's the right word. Because from what I've understood, you can look at some of the comments on your videos that you've done. People will come back at you and have disrespectful things to say, which that just comes with the territory of putting your opinion out there.
Oh,
but
yeah, right.
Are you passionate? Because I see some people who are very passionate about other people needing to believe and agree with everything you say.
I see what you're saying. Well, a couple things popped into my mind when you say that. You know Tyrone Magnus?
Yes.
I remember one time he posted a video where he said, you could be Mother Teresa, feed homeless people, and people are still going to hate you and disagree with you. And then I think I actually made a little wisdom nugget video where I said, I don't know if I uploaded this one. There's a video that I recorded, though, where I said something along the lines of, even if you were a perfect person and did nothing wrong, people will still disagree with you and hate you, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And so for me to answer your question, do I feel the need to have people agree with me? I don't care. I really don't care. It's not that, when I say I don't care, it's not meaning like, oh, I don't care about those people or whatever. Like, not a mean or angry or these people are stupid type of way. Just more so of, like you just said, it comes with the territory. I could say, You should love everyone. Someone's going to be, but what about the devil? And be like, what? How did that come to your mind? What? That doesn't make... So you're saying that you should love everyone? What about the devil? What about Hitler? What about... And people are just, I don't know, people are very disagreeable.
Mm-hmm.
And so with me posting my videos, I mean, especially last year, I was testing and just I kind of have a controversial personality. And I said that in one of my videos where I talked about how I got to 1,000 subscribers. I talked about how, in general, I have a controversial type of personality, simply because I think different. And so, and being even as a child, I'm not the kind of guy who I don't try to be controversial. I'm not trying to be, what my friend John said. He said something about shaking the boat, or I forgot what he said. I'm not trying to be controversial, but I'd say that even when I was a little kid, if I was in a room with a bunch of people and someone random asked me a question like, hey, so what do you think about whatever their topic that they're talking about? What do you think about this thing? And I'll say, well, I think this. And then everyone would be like, oh, I always had that. If I was at a Bible study or I was just at a hangout, and then even as a grown man, I remember one time I went to a church with some of my friends, and then after we went to church, we all went out to eat breakfast somewhere. And then I was in a relationship with a girl at the time, and she came with us, and then we went to go at some restaurant. And while we're eating, my friend's wife asked me a question. She said, hey, so I got a question for you. And just the way she started opening up was like, what's she trying to do here? And then just the way she worded it, it got everyone else's attention. Everyone turns their head. And I think she asked me something along the lines of, what would you do if a homosexual or a transgender person walked into this restaurant right now? What would you do? That was literally the question. And in my mind, I'm like, what do you think I would do? Disrespect them or something? Like,
Stand up in the middle of the restaurant, get up on your chair, and start screaming at them or something?
Why was that in your mind? We just got out of church, and then that like popped into your head. So I just said, knowing that people are curious about what I think about things, and she probably was thinking about that. I don't know. So I was like, you know what? Just before I answered, in a split second, I was like, I'm going to give her the answer that she wanted. She probably wants me to say something mean. And just see how people respond. And then I'll say I'm kidding afterwards. I thought about that in a split second, and I said, you know what? If I saw someone like that walk in here, and I stood up in my chair, I said, man, I would tell that person. And I just paused. And then everybody looked at me like,
oh my goodness.
Like they were expecting that. They were expecting me to say something like that. And then I said, I'm just kidding. And then everybody was like, oh my goodness, ha ha. Everybody started laughing and joking around, and everything was cool. But I used that moment to just try to test to see where some of these people's minds were with me. You know, some of these people are cool with me, but then some of them were kind of like snakes. And
because really, what difference does it make if some other person comes into the restaurant? It's not a...
Well, people assume that because you believe in God, so therefore, if you believe in God, then you hate people who are sinners, right? You hate people. I'm like, no, it's not true. That's not true. That's a lie.
Exactly. Because I'd be like, if somebody asked me that and they're like, what would you do? I'm like, I probably wouldn't even notice. I wouldn't care.
I was working a job in security, and a person was hired that was a transgender. People default to judgment when they don't understand something, right?
Very true.
And I talked to this guy like a normal person. He would tell me about his life, and then he would tell me about his background and where he came from and struggles and different things. And it's like, wow, this is a real person. This isn't just something. This isn't just media propaganda. Like, no, this is a guy who also has problems and struggles, and I have problems and struggles too. And I think that being around an environment where this is kind of off topic, but growing up around a lot of religious people, you kind of get raised to think in a way that's like, that person's different. That person's different. That person struggles with this. That's an adulterer. That's a drug addict. That's a gay person. That's a whatever it is, right?
And it's said not just as it's said in a judgmental way. It's not just, oh yeah, that person is gay. It's like, oh no, that person is gay.
Yeah, like,
and that's like disgust. Like there's all this judgment and hate attached to it.
But the thing is, though, is even us talking about this in this manner, someone will say, but you guys are justifying sin. You're justifying sin. See, because you're saying not to judge people. And it's like, hold on. No. Christ made something very clear.
Tell us.
He said, let me start preaching. He said, take the log out of your own eye first before you see the speck in someone else's eye.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, anyways, I know that's kind of off topic, but yeah. What led to that thought? I ended up talking about the restaurant I was at, but I think there was a question that you asked specifically.
I do not remember the specific question.
I think it was a question that you had written down.
Oh, let me up and back up my notes.
I'm trying to get you to ask more of those questions.
It was, do you care what other people...
So,
do you want other people... Are you passionate about other people believing what you believe and actually... Great.
So now that
I had another question.
Yeah,
but
now that we rabbit trailed into that direction, I don't care what people think about me. I've always been a controversial type of person. And I'm a man who's able to read a room, and with that in mind, I use that towards marketing as well. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to post this video. This is probably going to be the response. And being someone who's performed mentalism probably half my life by now. Yeah, I started when I was 15. I'm 30 now. I study psychology with the intent to understand how people think. And studying psychology, such as yourself, where you went to college for it, I studied psychology for the purpose of entertainment and blowing people's minds, as if I'm able to read people and read their mind and different things. But understanding psychology has helped me to have a greater love for people, because I understand, wow, this person is this way because of the things that led up to this moment. Whether it was their childhood, their parents, where they were raised, the country they're from, there's something that influenced them from the outside, and there is internal war happening where this person eventually became the person they are, the good and the bad that's in them. And so that's why I don't care what people think about me, because I understand now there are things in my life that I'm overcoming. If I'm in a room with somebody who deals with things and struggles that I don't struggle with, I don't care, because I understand I have things that I'm overcoming. And with that in mind, I'll end it here. When I post something, I'm not worried about what people think, because I know that psychologically people we live in a judgmental world. So I don't care.
That's awesome. That was deep. So I remembered the question. I have another question that I was going to write down in my notes as you were talking. Well, I should have. I wasn't going to, but I should have written it down in my notes as you were talking, because what you were talking about got me onto another question that we've talked about a little bit, but I kind of want to I want to hear it again. So what is sin? Because you said that people are going to be like, oh, you're over here justifying sin. And maybe they think it's justifying sin because of how they view sin. But in your opinion, what is sin?
I told you to bring it. So, something very intriguing to me in the Bible, that when Apostle Paul talks and he says that it wasn't me that did it, but it was sin in me that caused me to do it. What an excuse.
It sounds like a 2-year-old. I didn't
do it. It was sin that caused me to do it. It wasn't me. I don't think that sin is just the act alone. I think it's a deeper issue, and it kind of it's a heart issue, you know. And so, when you take a guy like Satan in the Bible, who when it talks about him being in heaven. Well, there's speculation on whether that story was something else or whatever. But the story of Satan being in heaven, and in his heart, he wanted to overthrow the throne of God. He wanted to be above the stars. He wanted to be above God. He wanted to be God, right? And just the idea alone, there was no attempt to try to overthrow God. It was just an idea where he was like, I kind of want to do that. That alone zapped him out of heaven, right? And so now, if someone doesn't believe in the Bible, it's not about believing in the Bible. Look at the principle of the story. It says that iniquity was found in his heart. There was something in him that made him have this evil desire to want to do something that he was not supposed to do, not allowed to do, not legally allowed to do. But he had a desire to do it, and he wanted to do it. And if he could do it, he would. And it reminds me of things like envy or jealousy or lust. Lust is not just like, oh, you recognize that this person's a beautiful person, right? It's in your heart, you're like, man, if I ever had the chance, I would. And you won't do it. That's your friend's wife or your friend's husband. You won't. That's your friend. But somewhere in the dark crevices of your dark, evil mind, you kind of want to do something. It's there. And you entertain that thought. You entertain that idea. It's kind of temptation a little bit. And so, yeah, I think sin is something that's inside of a person. It's like an evil intent, evil desire. Kind of like in the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve are sitting there chilling, eating some good fruit, eating some steaks, having a good time.
I don't think they ate meat in the garden.
Oh, yeah, they probably didn't eat any steaks. My bad. But they ate some pretty good fruit, though. Walking around, chilling. And little Satan comes around. And just listen to the analogy of the story. He says to Eve, hey, why don't you go eat from that tree? She says, well, God says that if we eat from the tree, well, we're going to die. And Satan says, no, it's not. God knows that if you eat from the tree, you're not going to die. He just knows that you're going to be like gods, knowing both good and evil. He just knows that you're going to be like him. He doesn't want you to be like him. And then she's like, well, that's an intriguing thought. You know, I'll be like a god, knowing both good and evil. And the idea of overthrowing God by eating the fruit, by being like a god, being equal to God, there's something about that idea that it's not just eating the fruit. People want to look at the moment where she ate the fruit, right? But there was a moment before she ate the fruit that she looked upon the fruit and it was desirable and she felt led to go and do this thing. And then lastly, let's take Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was tempted with a very similar thing that Adam and Eve were tempted with. Jesus was fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. He goes stand on top of a mountain at some point with Satan, as the Bible says. And then Satan tries to tell him to turn a rock into bread, not to break his fast. And then he tells him also to jump off a high place. And Jesus is like, nope, can't do that. Can't test the Lord your God. But there was one temptation in there where Satan says, look, if you just bow down and worship me, I'll give you everything, all that your eyes can see, all the kingdoms of the world. And it says that he showed him all the kingdoms of the world. Very similar temptation. Like, wait, you will rule the world. Jesus was going to, in this story, he was going to rule the world anyway. He was going to rule the world anyway. But the idea of that shortcut, or Adam and Eve, they wanted to be like God. They want to be like gods, but they were already in God's image. There's something about being equal to God and being able to choose right from wrong and be able to live your life however you want to live it with no boundaries, that right there is, I would say that's where we should look at where the sin's at.
So this rebellion is kind of what it sounds like.
And it doesn't call rebellion, it calls rebellion witchcraft. It's not just the rituals. Rebellion in and of itself, it calls it witchcraft.
Oh, that's deep. Rebellion, from what I understand. And it's not even necessarily the act of rebellion, but more so the idea, that desire of wanting to overthrow the powers.
Well, more like it's close, but what I'm saying, it's a heart issue. Like sin it's something in the heart of a man that causes them to want to do things that are evil.
Okay.
It's like a thing that drives you to want to do bad things. That's what I think sin is. It's not just committing adultery or just stealing from someone or just murdering. It's like, what was the thing that caused you to want to murder someone? What was the thing that caused you to want to steal? What was the thing that caused you to want to go sleep with that guy's wife? Like, what happened before you did the act? Whatever that thing is, that's the root of it. That's where the sin's at. And it goes beyond just an act. And so let's say, for example, you can create your own sins according to the Bible, because it straight up tells you if you think something is a sin,
Then
it might not even be a sin. But if you think it's a sin and then you do it, you're going against your own conscience. That's a sin.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think it's a heart issue. It's in the mind. It's in the heart. It's, yeah.
So it's not necessarily here's how I was raised, was the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, you were raised in a Christian home.
Yes.
Father was a pastor. So how'd they decease this thing?
Well, it was basically you follow the 10 Commandments, and you just and that's basically it, except then also whatever Jesus adds on. Even there's a lot of, these are some of the things I would have a conversation with my parents about as a teenager and even younger, because I really wanted to understand and I didn't understand. But it was, you follow the 10 Commandments. The rest of the law wasn't important to them. So there's other stuff like all the sacrifices, the way that they were told to eat, the Israelites were told to eat. Those things weren't important, but you needed to basically follow the 10 Commandments, and then the love your neighbor as yourself, which I think was misinterpreted. And then, of course, and then there was honor your parents, because the 10 Commandments say to obey.
Right.
And then in the New Testament, it talks about it in Deuteronomy. Never mind. There's another spot where it talks about you need to honor your parents as well. So those were the main ones that you were supposed to do and follow. And also esteeming others higher than yourself is the way that it's said in the Bible. But basically think of everybody else as being better than you, and they deserve more than you. It was this glorified sense of humility, but it was a false humility.
Oh yeah, because if not didn't want to interrupt, but because kind of like what comes to my mind is, wow, okay, if you just follow this list of rules and then you don't do it, all of a sudden you might have a little bit of pride come in, because you're like, wow, see, I'm able to keep all these rules. Anyways, as you were saying.
Right. So you have all of these rules that I was able to follow. Like, of course, I don't have any idols in the house, right? Like, none of those cute little statues. I'm not doing that stuff. So I don't tell lies. I knew how to tell not lies. And I was good at it.
You were good at lying by omission?
Basically. I knew how to lie without lying.
Yeah, you knew how to just kind of say half of the story. You knew how to, yeah.
Kept me
Well,
out of
completely
trouble.
honest. You just didn't give all the details.
Exactly. The things that I thought were not necessary, I did not
Just
include.
in case they come around, they're like, no, you lied. And you're like, no, no, no. Because the reason
Because
why I said that is because this part right here, and then it's like you finish off
right.
everything else that you were supposed to say because they found out. So
Ex-
now you look like you told the truth.
Exactly. Yes, it was terrible. But like I said, it kept me out of trouble, and that was my goal. Not that I'm saying a person should ever lie or be dishonest. Don't lie. That's not good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me as a magician, I never lie about my tricks.
You just don't tell them.
Right. I do exactly what you do. I just don't tell them. I'm like, oh, yeah. I read your mind. Right. Not kidding.
So, yeah. And then this thing with treating other people better than you treat yourself, that was just blown out of proportion with how I was raised to treat other people, because then I didn't treat myself well because everybody else, I'm not supposed to. Like, it goes against the Bible.
Right.
So it was just this false sense of humility. And, but you said something that kind of triggered another question that I brought.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me finish up, because there's gonna be people who be like, so are you justifying sin? Are you trying to say that are you trying to water down what sin is? Say, no. What I am saying is I'm holding you to a higher standard, saying you think that sin is just about trying to follow a list of rules, such as before Christ came, he's like, well, yeah, you've heard that it's been said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But in your heart, though, you're still lusting.
Right.
So someone will be like, well, okay, so I have to wait till I get married in order to have the fun, do the goods. But what if I just don't go the full distance now? Because the Bible doesn't say anything about that. Now you think that you found a loophole.
Right.
In your conscience, though, you feel like that's wrong. I probably shouldn't do that. I'm just trying to get away with being able to fulfill these desires without technically going the full distance. It's like, no, it's the heart. Where in your heart, you're like, I don't feel right about doing that.
In your heart, you still want to do the deed.
So, but that's something that it's not written in the Bible. But in your heart, though, and this is where now we're gonna get a little bit too deep,
No, let's go. Let's finish with this thought. Go ahead.
Well, basically, I was gonna say, talking about the word of God written on a man's heart, or the conscience, as you were talking about, the super ego. There's a part of us that knows right from wrong already without having read the Bible. But many people think that, oh, well, it must not be wrong if the Bible didn't say that it's wrong. It's like, no, you don't need the Bible to know right and wrong. Because a person will be like, well, I'll just do a Google search and I'm just going to look up and see if this specific thing that I'm planning on doing right now that I probably shouldn't do, but let me see if I could do a Google search to see if it kind of is okay according to the Bible. Okay, reading this article here. Oh, well, they're kind of justifying it. It looks like I can do this thing. In your heart, the whole time, you feel like you shouldn't do it.
Right. If you have to ask the question, then you probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's the thing, what you said earlier, where it's like, you said that people will only believe it if it's in the Bible. And so you could justify any evil act because the Bible never said anything about that. See, it says not to murder, but it never said anything about using a nuclear bomb.
Right.
And committing genocide. What if I have somebody else do it? What if I hire an assassin?
Right, because then
And
you're
it wasn't
clean.
me who did it. It was someone else who did it.
Oh,
So now we're going a little bit too far. But yeah, no, you can justify anything because you're like, oh, well, the Bible didn't say it. No, there's a part of you, inside of you, that God put inside of you that tells you right and wrong without you ever having read the Bible. So you could be a complete atheist and know, I don't feel right about doing this thing. I probably shouldn't do it.
Right. But okay, on those lines, there is also people who are very like overly legalistic at the same time, such
Oh,
as
right, yeah.
if you run a red light on accident, people don't be running red lights. But if you run a red light on accident, that's a sin.
Exactly.
Or if the speed limit says 40 and your foot is just on that pedal a little more than it should be and you're driving 41 or 42, you are living your life in sin.
Right.
So, how do you help? Because you're supposed to also obey the governing authorities. That's what Paul says in the Bible, and because it's in the Bible, we have to follow these things, especially in the New Testament, because we can say that Jesus helped get rid of the old law according to the New Testament because he fulfilled it, and now he gave us the new commandments. However, there is that struggle, and this is something I really struggled with growing up because of how legalistic my family was and how we were raised.
Right.
Was even like you're safer to be driving 35 in a 40-mile-per-hour zone because then at least you know you're not committing a sin.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, I ran a red light. If I die in this moment, if I don't ask for forgiveness, I'm going to go to hell for eternity now. Okay, so.
I'm telling you, there's a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
It was a.
And so, wow. See, honestly, I didn't even realize, I didn't think that this conversation was going to go this way. I didn't think that it was going to be really super, super spiritual. This is cool. I mean, this is new. This is unique. I would say in response to that part, like, oh, what about being legalistic? Because now it's like, well, now there's so many things that you have to not try to do because your conscience might be telling you to also not do something. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Right.
Well, then I would say it gets very deep. So now understanding the spirit of the law. Like, for example, let's take the Constitution, let's take the amendments, let's take the freedom of speech or freedom of expression. And we could probably all agree that that doesn't mean you should go and burn the American flag. We probably all agree with that. But is that what they meant when they wrote it? We don't know. These are dead men who wrote that book, or these who wrote these laws. They're dead. So, and meaning is only found inside of a person. So, if I and I always use this analogy where let's take an extreme example. For example, let's take a man who got hired to work at a job, and he was kind of petty. He was like a legalistic person. He was kind of religious. He only goes with the specific wording of what you say. He doesn't go with what you meant. He goes with only what you said. His boss tells him, "Okay, cool. You're gonna get paid this much an hour. I want you to go and clean the bathroom." Right? Guy goes to the bathroom. He's off for like an hour. The manager comes to check to see if he's actually doing his job. The manager comes back and says, "Hey, what's going on?" The dude's standing in the bathroom in the dark. The bathroom's not clean. Turns on the light. He says, "What are you doing?" The guy says, "Well, you told me to clean the restroom, but you never told me to go get the supplies." Wouldn't that be illogical?
Yes, but what's terrible is that's how I would have been.
Exactly.
Let me guess. He's also like, well, why isn't the light on too?
Yeah. Why isn't the light on? Yeah, it's exactly.
Like,
you didn't turn the light on.
You didn't tell me to get the supplies. You didn't tell me to turn the light on. You didn't tell me what part of the bathroom you wanted me to clean. Did you want me to clean the entire bathroom, even the walls and the ceiling?
Did you want me to do the whole bathroom? Did you want me to do all the bathrooms? Did you only... It's like, wait, dude, you got hired for a job. So, but the thing is, though, is something more important than a guy getting hired for a job. What about a man who's trying to live life in the right way? Your life. You do this with your life, where you will look at the Bible and say to yourself, well, it didn't say this, so therefore I'm going to do this thing now, or not do this or that, because it didn't say anything about it, so I have permission to just be free from this thing. It's like, okay, understanding the spirit of what is said, or understanding the meaning. So You take the Constitution, you take these laws where you have freedom of expression. It probably doesn't mean you can go burn the American flag, but people do it anyway. This is why you got lawyers and judges and things, and they're trying to debate like, should we put this person in jail? Should they get punished for this thing? I mean, technically, it didn't say that they couldn't burn the American flag. It's like, what do you do with that person? Well, you could probably agree they meant you have freedom to, like, whatever religion you want to be, whatever it is, but don't burn the flag. So you take the Bible and you take Jesus Christ and you take the Sabbath, and then everyone's like, well, you have to obey the Sabbath. And Jesus was out there working on the Sabbath with his homies, out there picking cotton. I'm just kidding. They weren't picking cotton. They were out there on the Sabbath. They were out there in the fields working, and some of these very religious people that were called the Pharisees, some Jewish folks who understood the Bible very well. They looked at Jesus and said, on the Sabbath, we're not supposed to work. What are your disciples doing? They're out there working in the field. And then Jesus looks at them and gives them a story and says, if your goat falls into a hole, aren't you going to pull him out? Well, I mean, yeah, that's work. And then Jesus goes on to talk about, no, look, it's not the Sabbath being a law. He says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Meaning, God wants you to have the freedom to have a day of rest, for you to relax. It's not him demanding that you obey the Sabbath. It's him giving, it's like a symbol of relaxation. God rested on the seventh day, or some people say the sixth day, right? I've heard people even say the eighth day. I'm like, whatever that means. But it's a symbol of rest. It's not, it was never meant to be a law that if you disobeyed it, you were to be punished for it. And now, okay, obviously, back in their time, they had a lot of laws. And kind of like how we were talking about earlier with Christ saying, you've heard that it's been said, thou shalt not commit adultery, but I say, if you even look upon a woman to lust after her, you've already committed adultery with her in her heart. Or you've heard that it's been said, you shouldn't murder, thou shalt not kill. But I say to you, if you even get angry with your brother, you've already murdered him in your heart. And so it's not, people think that Christ came to bring in new laws, new rules. No. He came to bring the actual meaning of what the original rules were. And if you go back into the beginning of time, back to Adam, life was supposed to just be heaven on earth. In the beginning, there was no church. In the beginning, there was no legalistic laws and rules that you had to obey. And if you didn't obey it, you're going to go to hell. The one thing was just don't try to be God, right? All right, you got me preaching now, but there's, in the beginning, life was not that way. And so being legalistic, and it's a result of a fallen world, because the laws of God, the heart of man has become corrupt. And we all know this. You don't need the Bible to know that. You just look around you. There is corruption everywhere. I just heard about a shooting recently, I think in Russia. There's a terrorist shooting.
Oh,
multiple
yes.
men.
ISIS, I think, claimed it.
Well, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that on YouTube, but
Sorry.
whatever. Sorry, YouTube.
Well,
but
we
the
can
heart of
erase
man
that.
is corrupt.
Yes.
And so as a result, now we need laws and rules, and now we need government to govern us and to cause us to obey laws that were originally in our heart that we naturally obeyed because we loved God and we loved our neighbor. We loved the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and loved our neighbor. So everything was so natural. But since men no longer obey the conscience, they no longer obey what you said, the super ego. I don't like using that word. They no longer obey the conscience. They no longer do their natural inclination to do what's right. Now they turn and they want to do things that are evil. So now you need physical government to govern you and to force you to obey laws and rules to maintain peace, to maintain safety. And it's not about legalism. It's about trying to set things back in order. But as a process of doing that, things become legalistic because people are so corrupt. They take rules and they think that if they just obey this set of rules, I can get away with some other things. And I don't know. I'm going. You got me ranting now, but
you said something interesting about the government having to set rules, and I think it would be great if we could kind of shift the gears a little bit. And I don't know if you would be interested in talking about this, but the issue that then comes into play for people who are legalistic is everybody knows governments tend to be corrupt. I don't know any government that isn't corrupt.
Yeah.
But then they're like, well, we have to obey the government. So if the government says that I have to wear a mask,
Right.
I'm going to do that. Even because otherwise, if I don't, I'm sinning and I'm going to hell. So, how do...
Man.
And I'm not saying people shouldn't, if it's a practical law, then yes, of course. But then you have governments that are going too far and are infringing on people's rights and their privacies and basically controlling the people, like in this one country.
Right. Yeah.
Are we allowed to talk about that one country? Yeah, where people they
What
are
do you do?
forced. Well, like, how do
you obey a government that's corrupt? Is that what you're asking?
Right. How do you obey a government that is corrupt like that?
Well,
Or are people misinterpreting that part of the Bible?
very interesting question. I would say, let's just start small. So, there's a story in the scriptures where Christ was talking to his disciples, and they were talking about taxes. And now, him claiming to be a king, right? He told Pontius Pilate. He made it very clear to Pontius Pilate, I'm a king.
Right.
Like, if I wanted to, I could wipe you out. But paying taxes, you see it too? You see a little gnat flying around?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
It's not on you though.
Okay. Yeah.
It was over here.
I felt it. It's attracted to the power of God in this conversation. Well, they're talking about taxes, and Christ basically told his disciples, he was like, look, just pay the taxes. To maintain the peace, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Right.
Or obey governing authorities. Or there's these different things in the scriptures where he makes it very clear his government is more important than any other government on earth. But the problem is that somewhere throughout time, if these biblical stories are true, right? Man wanted government over God. Instead of having God be their leader, they wanted man to be their leader. They wanted a physical king, a person. And God's like, all right, let y'all people do whatever you want. Go knock yourselves out. And man wanting to be ruled by other men, when you're talking about corruption, yes, men are corrupt. Mankind is corrupt. So, but this is what you asked for. You asked for a king. You asked for a government to rule over you outside of God and his kingdom. So as a result, you're going to have wicked people rule over you. And so with that in mind, do you obey the government? Well, yes, of course. Right? You got to maintain peace. You got to abide by the rules, abide by the laws and stuff. But as soon as it gets to a point where your government is forcing you to do something that goes outside of the higher government, then I would say that's probably something you don't have to do. To answer your question.
Okay.
Did I answer that clearly and concisely, or should I explain more?
No, I think you explained it well.
Okay.
How's time? We're almost.
25 minutes.
Is that 25 minutes?
Yeah. Go a little bit longer.
Okay. Because I was trying to figure out if I wanted to wind it up now or if we wanted to keep on with this conversation and then
We could do another 30 minutes.
wind it up. Okay. Okay. So you mentioned another topic that I think would be good to go on because when you talk about God's kingdom, I think people misunderstand it. I know on your podcast channel, on your YouTube channel, you talk about this one guy, Miles Monroe, and you even have one of his sermons on there. So can you kind of explain a little bit about God's kingdom and what you mean by that so that people understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, God's kingdom, man. Well, it's very simple. Where let's say, for example, instead of God's kingdom's not a religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a church.
You're gonna have people mad at you for saying that. So you're saying that going to church is not necessarily what God wants?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Well, we need church
Okay.
as of today
Okay.
because the world's in a fallen state, right?
Okay. Yes.
What do you think about that?
I agree. I agree that it's important for people of similar beliefs to be together in fellowship.
Yeah, be united and help each other edify one another.
Right.
But in the beginning of time, there was no church
That's deep.
because actually, why is it deep to you?
Well, because it.
Did Adam have a church? Did Eve have a
No,
church?
no. That's what makes it deep because whenever you're raised in the church, your dad's the preacher, and of all the things that were not mentioned was that.
Right.
Like you don't. It's not talked about. So you don't think about it, and you just, it's not a topic of conversation. And that's what makes it interesting.
But the thing is, though, is I think that a lot of people aren't honest with themselves about that. How in the world did the church get here? Well, it didn't come here until the fall of man.
Mm-hmm.
Because you take this biblical story where there was a perfect utopian world, heaven on earth, the Garden of Eden, which sounds like an amazing place to live at and to get up out of here.
Mm-hmm.
If I could press a button to get out of here, I probably would to go there. But obviously, we live in a fallen world right now. And as a result, God put together a program in hopes to bring back order. And that's why I would say the church is here.
Wasn't the original church actually founded because, like, by someone who didn't even believe in Christian, like in what the Christians believe? Do you know about that?
Are you like in the Bible?
No, not in the Bible. Like,
Oh,
well,
are you talking about the Catholic Church?
Maybe the Catholic Church. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that invented by somebody who?
Well, you have that right there. I don't know all the specific details on that. I watched some documentaries on it.
Mm-hmm.
Still learning about that specific because you take the Crusaders. I remember watching a documentary about the Crusaders and going to war. They believed in Jesus, right? But they didn't they have a whole different belief system of how that worked? I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't know.
remember all of
Yeah.
it, but
I'm still learning about that.
so basically, what you had said earlier, with God didn't invent the religion. He didn't invent church. That wasn't even his thing. And then I was like, I remembered that, but it was about the Catholic Church. Because at the beginning, Christians would just meet up and hang out. And they would sing songs, somebody would speak. So it's kind of like a church service kind of thing. But it, like, there was somebody. I think it was for the Catholic Church as it became more of a thing. And there's speculation on whether that person actually believed in God. If you know who it
Constantine?
is, yeah, I believe it was Constantine. Somebody should fact check
Constantine.
it.
That was. I remember watching the documentary on him, and I've heard about Constantine before. And yeah, it's like wow, he was just like this amazing Christian, right? But then you like look into his story, and then he was worshiping some other gods, and he also wanted to be like Christ. He wanted people to see him kind of like as a Messiah and stuff, and he worshipped the sun god and different things, and so
I couldn't remember his name.
Constantine. It may be him.
Yeah, fact check it, guys, and drop it in the comments for me. Yeah. So we're gonna start winding down. This has been an awesome interview. I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything specific that you would like to tell the audience? Anything that we haven't talked about yet? Something that you want people to know, though?
I would say, what comes to my mind? We had a very spiritual conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's interesting talking about when having someone ask you specifically what you believe, because normally when I'm talking to people, I don't answer like those specific types of questions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that here would be something that comes to my mind. A lot of people sometimes think I'm a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to the Bible. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't look at myself like a knowledgeable person. And the reason I say that is because I'm just searching. I didn't get into my studies with the purpose of regurgitating information just so that people believe what I believe, or I'm not like in the beginning when you asked me, are you looking for converts? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just a guy who, this is stuff that I've studied and this is what I've learned and this is the stuff that I apply to my life and it works for me, right? And so your questions, very good questions, and my answers, I answered them to the best of my ability with the knowledge that I have right now with those topics. But in the future, who knows? There might be something that I said today that in the future I might be like, I don't know, I may be wrong about that idea, or maybe there's something more I need to learn here, or I'm constantly learning. So I think the main thing would just be an empty vessel, always willing to learn and then relearn and then drop, and be comfortable with the idea of it's okay to say, I don't know. I really don't know. And when you, like, even when you ask that question, who was the person who started Christianity, Catholic Church, or whatever it is? I'm like, I don't know. A lot of people have a hard time saying, I don't know.
That's true. Very true.
We fill in the blank instead of saying, wow, I just read this passage in the Bible. I don't know what it means. But you know what? I'm just going to do a Google search. And whatever Google says, that's what I'm going to make it mean for me. And for me, I don't do that. I used to do that. And that's when you start getting into this legalistic habit of creating rules on your life. And then you add so many rules to yourself and you're trying to obey so many rules because you've misinterpreted so many things then now you've created your own religion unto yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I say is be an empty vessel. If you don't understand something when you read it, or someone says something, or me, I've said some things that may have intrigued the person. They're like, wow, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Or, wow, sounds too good to be true. Or, I don't know if this guy's right. He's probably a false prophet, a false teacher, a false messiah. Well, this thing right here was right. He said 10 things that are right, but this one thing is wrong. Therefore, he's a false teacher, or he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Whatever it is. People throw out accusations and different things. And what I'm saying is, no, I'm just like you. I just so happen to be on a podcast and I look nice. I'm dressed well, and I don't see myself above anyone else or below anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a guy who's trying to learn. And I just so happen to be sitting across someone who's curious about my ideas and what I think. But I don't go around preaching these ideas as if what I think is the only truth and the only gospel. And I believe that there is one gospel. I believe that there is one truth.
Mm-hmm.
And just like anyone else, I'm constantly trying to seek what is the truth. I want to know the truth for my own sake. So when someone asks me, what do you think about this? I'll tell you what I think, but I'm still learning. So that would be a big one right there.
So you see yourself as just a man on a quest to figure out how to live life. Is that what you're saying?
And on top of that, I feel like everybody has a purpose in life, and that God calls us, and he gives us a purpose, and he leads us down that path. And for me, that's the journey that I'm on in my life, where I'm constantly seeking, and I want to know my highest priority in life,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the thing that I strive to constantly be the highest priority in my life, is to understand the mind of God. How does God think? And
That's interesting, because I don't think any human actually understands how deep that question can get.
Right. Like, I don't want to know just what does the Bible say. No, I want to know the author of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the author, the who created the world. How does he think? What does he want?
Mm-hmm.
What does he desire? And so with that in mind, I'm just, some people, when they see you on a podcast and you sound articulate, you look like you're a smart person and things, they'll put you on a pedestal and they think that you're above them.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying is I'm not. I'm just a normal dude. And that'd be the thing that comes in my mind. Like, what do I want people to know?
That's awesome. Thank you. Now, you're on this quest, trying to understand your purpose, understanding how to live your life the right way. You want to understand God and the heart of God, how he thinks and his will and his purpose.
Mm.
Why have you not chosen to go down the path of being a pastor or a reverend? And this is a question I've wondered for a long time.
Finally,
so there we go. There we go. There's a question I've wondered for a long time, and I don't think I've ever really asked you like that.
That is so funny. That is hilarious.
Because you are very knowledgeable on the Bible, and even topics outside of the Bible that you can use, you can reference them together. So when you're talking to someone about spiritual matters, you're talking to people about what the Bible teaches, you can pull ideas and concepts from multiple places. Even your illustrations are not coming straight out of the Bible. You have like these stories and analogies. So you're not just talking out of the Bible. And so with having that way of communicating, I'm like, why not being a pastor? I feel like you have a gift in this area. Does it, and before you answer that, does it have to do with you're just on your own personal journey right now? Does it pertain to that as well? Like you're just trying to figure things out for yourself and you don't feel ready? Or do you just like...
That's a deep question right there. That's probably the best question you asked so far. That's a deep one.
Oh, nice. Save it for last.
Right. I would say that why haven't I become a pastor? There's a couple things that come to my mind. One would be age of 15. I started going to church around 14, 15 years old. And then probably my second year. At the age of 16, at some point in my life, for about 10 years, I became a very legalistic, Bible thumping Christian. And I would say that I was a bit judgmental, specifically towards other Christians. And I say that because, yeah, I went to church with my grandpa for a little bit, but that's not really where my church background came from. It came from some friends that I met that lived close by, and we all went to church together, and I went with their family, and we had a good time at this non-denominational church. And I was a young man genuinely seeking after truth for myself because I thought that it was too risky to not know what happens after death. I had a desperate desire to know, like, what happens after you die. I gotta know. It's too abstract for me. It's too unknown. Someone has to know what happens when you die. And hearing about Jesus and different things, and like, well, okay, if historically, if this man genuinely rose from the dead, he must know something that I don't know. If this is a true story, all of the faith is hanging on this idea that this man rose from the dead.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, he must know something that I don't know if this truly happened. So I decided to learn as much as I can about Jesus. But when I would go to church, I had a lot of questions when I was going to church, non-denominational church. And like I said, I have a very controversial type of personality because I think different. And I would go to church and I would ask people questions about things that I see in the Bible and compare it to what the pastor said. The pastor said this, but the Bible says this. And I'd ask people that. And my question alone made people feel uncomfortable. They'd be like, I remember I was in a van with this guy who we would go to church, and then I remember he asked me, where are you getting these ideas from? Why are you asking all these questions? Where is this coming from? I'm curious. I gotta know. And I'll go to a Bible study. I'll be with a pastor somewhere. I would be with people who went to church all their life. And I would constantly asking questions because I just thought, well, you guys have been going to church all your life, right? You must know the answer to this question that I'm asking you. How come when I ask this question, it's like no one knows? And it's like a cliche answer, like, oh, yeah, just pray about it. Just read the Bible. It's in there somewhere. I'm like, I remember one time I asked one of my close friends when I was a little kid. I think I was, this goes way back. I think I was 9 or 10 years old. I remember I asked one of my friends, I said, the stuff, something along the lines of, I remember watching Harry Potter or something. And I asked my friend, is it wrong to do witchcraft? Like, is that from the devil or something? I think like the stuff on Harry Potter, or like people do witchcraft in real life. Is that bad? And then I remember him going to church as a kid, and I'm a kid. He looked at me. He just shrugged his shoulders, almost like he was an annoyance that I even asked the question. He's just like, well, I don't know. Just the way he shrugged his shoulders was like, I'm here because my parents bring me here. And so I'm like, oh, gosh. So, yeah, even as a little boy, I was just so curious about God. Now, with that in mind, I've constantly studied, but then I constantly prayed and begged God to reveal himself to me, show himself to me, guide me in life. I want the truth. I want the answers. I want, just show me. I want to, like, you got the guy like the Apostle Paul and these men who they had all these experiences. Paul knew things that were outside of the Bible. It's that God revealed things to this man, right? And he wasn't allowed to talk about it in the Bible. You got King Solomon, who had more wisdom than anyone on earth. He had so much wisdom that it couldn't be written down in the Bible. Like, what did he know? You're telling me that he had direct connection with God, and he knows things that aren't in the Bible? Like, what do these men know that I don't know? You got Moses talking to God on the mountain, God revealing things to him, giving him glimpses, and all these men, they all had these crazy experiences where they had some like a vision or some knowledge was imparted to them. And I'm like, these guys aren't special. Like Apostle Paul, he's like, look, I'm the worst of everyone else. I used to kill Christians. I
Mm-hmm.
used to murder them. I'm the worst of all of them. So, you know, and I'm like, okay, this guy was a murderer. Like, he is not more special than me. How do I get where he's at? How do I get on his level? And so I had to take my mind out of the Christian way of thinking
Mm-hmm.
and think to myself, what does God want? These men knew God on a level. They knew the author. They didn't know just the scriptures like the Pharisees. I want what they got. How do I get so close to God that I know God, that I almost don't even have to have faith anymore? Where
Mm-hmm.
Adam and Eve, did they have to have faith in God? No, they just walked with them. Do I have to have faith that you're here? You're sitting here in front of me. I don't have to have faith and believe it. I'm like, is it possible to get so close to God that I know him? That's what I want to know.
That's amazing.
And so someone asked me, you,
Mm-hmm.
how come you don't want to be a pastor? I'm still on this journey. And I kind of in my imagination, I think in my mind, I'm like, I probably in my old age, once I've had a lot of experience in life and different things, I'll probably eventually be a pastor, have a church, and do those things and kind of like be a father to people. Like I want to be a really good representation of God the Father on earth. But I got a lot of problems that I'm
Mm-hmm.
overcoming in my life. And so I'm learning to become way more patient with people. And you know me, like I've grown in a lot of patience with people,
Mm-hmm.
especially with my job in security, or having people threaten to kill you and angry people, and just difficult people. I've learned how to be a lot more patient. But I can see like there's another degree that I can get. There's another degree of patience. There's another degree of love. There's another, and I know that I can't do it on my own. I have to have God to help me to get on that level, that Christ consciousness that we're talking about.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I don't want to just be a pastor just for the sake of being a pastor because I have knowledge. If I was ever a pastor, I'd want to be a pastor because I know God.
That's deep.
And so today I'm not saying that I don't know God. I think I know God a little bit. We're getting to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he already knows me inside and out, but I'm trying to understand him. And so, yeah, you know, and then the other thing would be it's not that I just want to wait in my old age. It's not about that. I'm willing to do it whenever. If God tells me, hey, you need to be a pastor today or whatever, I'll do it. But the other thing is I don't want people thinking the only way you can truly serve God is if you're a pastor, a missionary, evangelist, a prophet, or some teacher, some sort of what. I know you can be a businessman
Mm-hmm.
and be just as close to God to any pastor. You could be just as close to God as the Apostle Paul as a businessman or
Mm-hmm.
whatever area of life that you want to be in. An artist, a guitar player, a podcast host, and you want to talk about conspiracy theories, whatever it is, you could be just as close to God. It's not just bound to this, and I don't mean to sound like I'm yelling.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
You're not just bound to this construct of what you think that this God thing is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And you look throughout the Bible, God used anyone. That's why I have not become a pastor. I've thought about it, I've considered it, but yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Well,
10 minutes.
we got 10 minutes. Okay. Um, that's interesting how you point out you don't have to be a pastor in order to serve God. In order to tell other people about what you believe, you don't have to be like, it's almost like there's these levels. At least how it was for me growing up. There's like these different levels. Like you have, just like you just go to church, and then you might be a teacher, you might be a deacon, you like there's these levels within the church, and then the highest level would be the pastor.
Yeah.
And or the senior pastor, because you also have multiple types of pastors as well, but the highest level is that one. And it's almost like that's what Christians aspire to reach, is some level of in that
I'm a
area within the
Christian now.
church.
You know, I feel led to be a missionary. I feel led to do this. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
some people, so many people say they feel led to do something and they end up not working. And then I remember, never mind. You know what? I'm not gonna say that. So, but I just want to be a witness, and a
Right.
witness is somebody who didn't just read the Bible. It's like no, a witness is someone who saw something,
Saw something, experienced something,
saw it.
like you're there. You were a part of
Yeah, and
something
a
that
lot of people
happened.
are like, "Oh, I read the Bible from front to back. I went to
Mm-hmm.
Bible college and stuff. I know God now." So no, just because you read His book doesn't mean you know Him.
Right.
You got to be a witness.
I got this certification on hermeneutics, so now I know how to interpret the Bible properly. And I'm like, good job on getting that certification, but that
Huh,
doesn't mean you've had the experiences.
right.
Um,
Someone would ask me, "How do you know God was in your life?" I'd be like, "Dude, because I look at the change in my life.
mm-hmm.
I used to be a hate-filled person. I was angry at the world,
Mm-hmm.
so mad. I felt like the world did me wrong. Why was I born into this family? Why was I born in this situation? I don't deserve this, all that." And I grew and I had hatred. And that hatred just started going from here to shrink, almost completely just gone. I don't know if it's gone or what, but I've changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have so much more peace. I used to be depressed. I used to be depressed. I used to have self deletion thoughts and actually consider those thoughts. Um, there's so much that I used to have anxiety. There were so many things I used to have. I had so many problems, and then seeing that I overcoming those things,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I tried to overcome these things on my own, and a lot of people overcome these things. Well, they don't overcome these things. They suppress these issues with drugs or
Yeah, they replace the issues with other issues.
yeah. And so yeah, the change in my life, I see that it works.
Mm-hmm. So, in closing, what would you tell someone, say between 15, 22 years old, who's maybe they've had a similar experience as you? What would you say to them as far as being able to start understanding themselves, becoming successful? How can they
Wait,
achieve
say the
that?
last part again. You said becoming successful, and right before you
Yes.
said that, you said what?
Um, understanding like who they're supposed to be.
I would say, let's say I was talking to like a 15-year-old version of myself right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, bro, you're on the right path. No, I'm kidding. No, if I was talking to someone in general, 15 and to their 20s,
It could even be your 15 to 20-year-old self.
yeah, I would say kind of the concept of becoming an empty vessel. I would say you don't know everything. When you're young, you start thinking that you know more than your parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know more than everybody else. You may learn a few things and you think you got it all figured out. I am constantly learning, and then the more that I learn, the more I realize I don't know, and the more I learn, the more I realize how ignorant I am. And with that in mind, I would say to my younger self, what do you want? Whatever that big thing is that I want,
Mm-hmm.
I would make it very clear to my younger self. Man, if it was me, I know that I would have received this piece of information if I was 15 years old. If a man came to me and said, "Look, what do you want?" Well, I want to be a magician. I want to help people. I want to whatever it is. I want to write books. I want to this. I would tell that young man, do it. And do all that you can to do it. You're a young man. Go completely all in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just like dabble with it, play around with it. When you're if you're following God, because when I was a young man, I had aspirations. I would tell him to go all in on those things.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell him to gain as much wisdom as humanly possible, and then to never put yourself above anyone else. Always be teachable, always learn, and yeah, don't put yourself above anyone. I had a lot of pride when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was just the best thing on since sliced bread. I used to think of myself so highly, and it's not that I look down on myself. It's just now, just more so. It's just I've had experiences where I needed to be humbled, and when I was a kid, I had a lot of pride, and I think a lot of young men have pride. And I think if I could have clearly articulated that to myself as a young man, just drop the pride. It doesn't work. That'd be a huge one.
Amazing. Well, we'll go ahead and close it up. Thank you very much for coming on my podcast.
Absolutely. What'd you think? What do you think about this podcast? This is your show?
I loved
First time
it.
There? You had a fun time?
I had a great time.
Heck yeah.
It
you
was
learn
awesome.
anything about me? Like how?
Yes, there were some things that I found interesting that you said, like what you said about how you're just on a journey to understand God, understand your purpose in life. The way how you explained it was very deep, and I had never heard you explain it like that.
Amazing.
So that was probably the biggest thing that I learned from you today.
Because I remember Grant Cardone, he would always say, he's like, I just want to know my potential. I want to know my potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, yeah, I want to know my potential too, but I know that my potential is found in him.
Exactly.
And so it's like, if I want to know my potential, I got to know him more.
Mm-hmm.
And I reflect his image. I don't want to start preaching.
I'll have to have you back on so you can, because there was some other things that we didn't get to talk about, such as you've mentioned a couple of times about a magician being a magician, illusionist, and we didn't get to talk about that topic either.
Next time.
So I'll have to have you back on.
Yes, we had fun.
But let us know what you think in the comments, and if you have questions, we will ask them. Drop them in the comments, and I'll ask them in the next interview.
Heck yeah, subscribe to Doozy Talks and subscribe to the Creedpodcast. God bless.